Okay, so here we are with the Central East Region Offsite General Assembly Orientation for 2018. And let's start by Eric and Darcy, if you could introduce yourselves.
Okay, well, I'll start. I'm Eric Birch. I attend Rockville, and I'm actually running the Central East Region on-site delegates orientation. But Evan and Darcy asked, hey, can I also help out with the people doing off-site? And sure, yeah, because a lot of the business items and stuff like that are identical. So that's me, and now Darcy.
I'm Darcy Laine. I'm a minister at the UV Church of Athens and Shishikwan, and I actually serve in a number of capacities with a lot of small churches. And I was noticing that when I said to them, General Assembly, they would say, what? Or we don't do that. And I thought attending as a virtual delegate is such a wonderful way for congregations that otherwise aren't participating in General Assembly to get involved. And to get that sense of pride and connection that comes when you, that those of us who've been lucky enough to experience General Assembly in person feel when we're there. It's also like I think the most fun way to get briefed on some of the big issues in Unitarian Universalism and in social justice. And so my perspective, rather than technical, is how to have fun with attending General Assembly as an off-site participant, and how to make it a party. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about tonight.
Thanks, Darcy. Would folks, if you're not on the phone, just say hello, where you're coming in from, where, in the chat box, and any specific questions you have so that we have a sense of who's here. You can just click at the bottom of your screen, hit the chat, and type in your name and congregation, and then maybe a little bit about why you're here. First GA, great. Okay, so Scott's found the chat. Here we go. Folks have found it. Good. Okay, and I'm going to pull up some PowerPoint slides for Eric. So Eric's going to go first here and talk about General Assembly as a whole, and then we're going to switch to Darcy and talk about how to make it a party.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll see which screen comes up here. Oh, yes, there it is. All General Assemblies have a motto, if you will. This year's is all are called. So if we want to flip to the next one, next slide here. So yeah, so basically, again, I'm Eric Birch. This is my thing. If you would like these slides, there's a whole other slide deck that talks about doing a lot of on-site things, like how to get a taxi and stuff like that. I can send that to you. You could send me an email down there at eriklbirch@gmail.com and get in touch with me. So that's so I'm also a member of CLF. You'll find that there's a lot of people who go to GA who also belong to CLF. So our next slide says something probably interesting here. The next one, okay, so the thing that, if you're not familiar, as Darcy brought up, you know, people are there like going, well, we don't go to General Assembly, we don't do General Assembly. Well, okay, that's fine. The first thing about the UUA, if you're not otherwise familiar with it, is it's made up of congregations, right? It's not made up of people. We're an organization of organizations. But the purpose of the UUA is to equip our congregations and leaders and to use our prophetic voice in the world. And we're going to do that by coaching, companioning, connecting us together. The UUA also does practical things like run a health plan and prints hymnals. It does credentialing for ministers. It helps your congregation if you go into like a search process or are having some other problems, some other assistance. The UUA is there to help. You'll discover that there are 4 or 5 regions that the UUA is split up into, and we're part of the Central East region. There's a New England region, a southern region, and then most of the a Mid-America region, and then a Pacific West region. So I guess that's 5. And in each of those regions, there are UUA professionals who help the congregations in their region. They're the first line of communication to the UUA. The UUA itself is there's also the president of the UUA. That is the chief executive officer of the UUA. The UUA is governed by a board of trustees. There are 14 which are elected. 11 of these are at-large trustees. Like the president of the UUA is also an ex officio member of the board of trustees. You'll hear about the moderator. The moderator runs the show at General Assembly. The moderator also runs the show during the monthly board meetings at the UUA. Right now, I believe there's 2 moderators. We have co-moderators. The moderator of the UUA is the chief governance officer, traditionally the highest level volunteer. The UUA, through the president, will take a stand on some issues based on input from member congregations. So there's 1,000-member congregations. We occasionally agree on things, and using that as a basis, the UUA president and UUA staff will perform actions and make statements on behalf of the entire association. The 7 principles are the base of the covenant that binds all of these congregations together, especially if you are on site or if you hear some debate during some of the meetings that we'll have. Know your principles by number. Okay, so you'll hear things like maybe the 5th principle task force, which is still around, I think, which is trying to get more involvement in the democratic process, get more people being able to come to General Assembly, participate in General Assembly, because a strong democracy is one that has a lot of participation in it. There's also one thing that every so often will come up that the UUA board will mention, which is the global ends and the shared vision. And that's like 14 statements that says things like we're going to grow Unitarian Universalism to be a major force of good and stuff like that. So that's on page 63 of your program book. And, maybe the next few pages we will learn how to download that. So if we go to the next slide. General Assembly is important to the UUA, okay? This is our annual meeting when we all get together and we get the status of what's happening in the association. We do business kinds of things. I'm not sure if we approve a budget, but there are budget hearings, things like that. We decide on social action issues, okay? So there's and now it just escaped me. There's a congregational study and action issue, CSAIs. It's a multi-year process where we debate on various how we're going to implement things. We send that to the UUA staff. They come up with educational materials and other items, and then report back to the General Assembly. Here's, we've studied this for a few years. We come up with a statement of conscience, which is approved by the General Assembly, and then it becomes one of the statements that as a denomination we say things like, recently there was one that, we have a concern about escalating inequality in American life. Okay, so there's a multi-page statement that goes along with that. We also acknowledge milestones when you are your ministers who become fully fellowshipped and stuff. There's a service of the living tradition where we acknowledge these milestones that some individuals have attained. We elect our officers, and we also have affirm and approve year-round activities by various commissions. There's a commission right now that was formed last year to look at the 7 principles and also look at how to incorporate this 8th principle stuff that you might be hearing about into our principles. Maybe next year we'll come up with a new list of slightly reworded principles, which I think that we're way overdue on, by the way. That's just my opinion there. General Assembly allows our individual congregations to gather and speak with a common voice. We have over 500, I think there's like 520 statements of social justice since 1961 of various sorts, either statements of conscience or there's also actions of immediate witness you may hear about, which are things which are happening right now that we want to comment on. General Assembly will do that. It's a if it comes up, AIWs are debated during the 4 days of General Assembly, and at the end it says this 51st, I think it were 52nd General Assembly. We think that we should encourage greater gun control legislation, for example. I'm not sure, we may already have a statement on that. I'm not sure. It's also very important for our congregational polity because we don't have a clerical governance structure, right? There's not too many bishops or popes or deacons or various other things. We are very much congregational. We love our ministers, but we are free to agree or disagree with them. Next slide. What's the next one? Okay, so for 2018, I always like to, I've done this briefing a few times. I always like to try to figure out what's going on within the denomination. So white privilege has been a big deal. Last year, we had our president resign. We also had a few other senior UUA staff be taken out or resigned for various reasons. So the eighth principle, which has been slowly growing in significance, the work for the eighth principle has actually been going on for several years. It just became really white hot last year. So you'll see that we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So that's my congregation in Rockville. Just last week during our annual meeting, we voted as a congregation to encourage the UUA to continue to incorporate this sentiment in our principles, and so we'll see what happens with that. Other items you're coming up during this General Assembly. We have 2 congregational study and action issues coming up. The General Assembly may vote to accept one or the other or neither. I'm not sure if we can do both. I think we can only do one. In your program book, you will see the text of these CSAIs. And what will happen is if we decide to go forward with the CSAI this year, I believe there's a year of study about what then happens with it. Next GA, we will then say, okay, this is the plan of action that we're going to go through with this CSAI. And then there's like a 2-year development that goes through that, where the UUA will be offering our congregations various bits of educational material and such. At the end of that, we may come up with a statement of conscience that says, we, the member congregations of the UUA, say XYZ, and we are going to try to do ABC and things like that. If you looked at the preliminary agenda, by the way, I'll point to the website a lot, uua.org/GA. Okay, it's that simple. You can get the details of what is being put onto the agenda. There's a few bylaw revisions that are coming up. One of them is about the CSAI process itself. Right now, it's about a 3 or 4 or 5 year process. They're going to try to get more interaction on more than an annual basis on some of this activity. We're doing things like Zoom meetings and things like that. We all don't have to travel to Boston to see things face to face. So maybe we can accelerate some of these decisions and some of this discussion that can go on. There's also, I know, a bylaw that somebody in my congregation is putting forward that right now we've got the Board of Trustees and we have the individual member congregations. We used to have districts in between, but the districts have gone away. The regions are now in there, but there's no formal governance structure in the regions right now. So there's going to be some sort of intermediate between the Board of Trustees and the individual congregations, so we don't have 1,000 congregations trying to bug the Board of Trustees. That instead will have some intermediate governance structure where 200 congregations bug that intermediate governance structure, and then they bother the Board of Trustees. That's what's going on there. One of the big things that's come up is that we're supposed to be voting on a moderator next year. The search committee earlier this year came out and they asked several people if they would like to be moderator, and they all turned them down. So one of the bylaw changes is going to be allow multiple people to do this. In the past, the moderator was tended to be somebody who had kind of a lot of free time. It really is a full-time job, and that's a lot more than you really want to volunteer will sign up for. So there is some language to have multiple moderators trying to work on that task. Right now, there are 2 moderators. We have, I think, last year we had 3 moderators, I think, for a while. So we're working through this. It's a big job, and and one person volunteering their time can't really do it. That's sort of the bottom line there. So on our next slide, let's see, what's the next slide that Evan? Okay, there we go. So one thing about General Assembly, if you've never been there before, if this is cool, there is a lot of General Assembly speak. If you're spending, you'll hear things like CSW, CSAI, AIW, SOC, right? And that is the Commission on Social Witness. That is the commission in the UUA that worries about the process of how we do CSAIs and actions of immediate witness and things like that. They are responsible for that. Everybody, once you've been to about 5 or 6 or 7 General Assemblies, you just start going into acronym speak. If you're confused, ask, because even I learn things, and I've been going for quite a few years. So the other thing that you'll hear about in General Assembly are things called general sessions. They're sometimes called plenaries because for 49 years we called them plenaries. But that is where all the delegates get together, hear reports, and vote on items. As an offsite delegate, you can participate in all of the general sessions. You can watch them if you go to uua.org/GA. During General Assembly, you can watch it from the comfort of your home. Back when I was doing some offsite, we would get together at Cedar Lane, had a very nice library, very nice TV, and there was about 6 or 7 of us who would sit around and watch General Assembly from Cedar Lane. So that was a lot of fun. I'll let you guys organize that. We'll just do that. One thing that you'll hear about is our mini assemblies. Mini assemblies are very important. If you're looking at the agenda and you say, hey, I don't like this particular wording of this proposed motion, I want to change it, you have to do that during a mini assembly, okay? So they will have, for offsite people, they will have a conference microphone in there. You can't see what's going on, but you will be able to participate in the debate, because all of the real debate for many of the business items happen during these mini assemblies, and they happen during the workshop times. So all of the items, bylaw changes and things like that, if you go through the agenda and you say, hey, I don't like this, or you can improve it this way, or we should consider this, that's all done during the mini assembly. During the general sessions, all they will do is they will bring up the original motion. They will tell you about all the amendments to it, so how the motion is currently worded. And the only thing that you can do during the general session, generally, is you can reconsider amendments that were brought up during the mini assembly, and there is a lot of precedent for the general meeting, the plenary, to decide, yeah, that was really a good amendment, so we're going to reincorporate that amendment into the motion. So, but it has to start during the mini assembly. So that's mini assemblies. If you have something that you really care about, mini assemblies are very important. You'll also hear about, if you haven't heard of BLUE, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, you'll hear about BLUE a lot during General Assembly. That's one of the, this is page 1 of 87. We'll go through the next 86, never, but, but if you haven't heard of BLUE, that is the Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, and they are run by what's called the Organizing Collective, which I think is really cute. Next slide. Let's see what's our next slide. Oh, okay. So get ready before you go. There we go. The really important website to go to is uua.org/GA. You have to spend at least 2 hours there, and if you're not, you're going to spend at least 6 hours there, because that's kind of, especially as an offsite delegate, that's going to be where everything is. And from there are probably right now dozens of web pages that go into various bits of things like the program book, the agenda, things like that. There is a forum available there, uua.org GA forum, and there's some activity there. It will actually start to ramp up a lot. And in past years, when people start talking about things like bylaw revisions and stuff like that, you'll see a lot of discussion, that's happening there. And then, hopefully if something interesting it comes up in there, it will come up during the mini assembly. There's also people looking for, if you're going to Kansas City, rides and hotel rooms and things like that. So the forum is there, and it probably will be getting better all the time. There is a program book available there. It's a big PDF file. Again, the thing is that as a delegate, you should read pages 1 through 6. I used to have some program book printed out here. But it also has all the workshops, which generally you're going to have some problems going to. It will tell you about when the mini assemblies are and things like that. I don't know if you're going to mention that there's an app you can download. I also mentioned there's the Illuminations app, which is still around, which gives you a little chalice you can light if you wish. But there is the General Assembly application here, and you can download it and register. And here's some news feed that's going on. What's kind of interesting is that, among other things, is a list of all of the attendees who have downloaded the app so far and signed up. So you can, especially if you're on site, if like there's a minister or somebody, you want to message them, you want to see what's up with them, you want to do various things with them, you can do that through the app. I am not sure, but I think that offsite delegates also have an app they have to download to actually participate in voting. Okay, in years past, that had to be done, and when you sign up, I'm sure that somebody will tell us about that very soon. So, one thing, especially if you're on site, there's a daily summary. This is it's on the inside cover of the program book, page -1, I think. It tells you what's happening Wednesday through Sunday. The green sessions here are the general sessions, and then there's some workshop sessions and other various things. By the way, after the General Assembly, about 3 weeks later, you'll get an email that says, hey, if you want audio and stuff like that from the workshops, all the workshops, you can download the audio. The video from the general sessions is available. You can watch last year's general sessions if you wish. They're online. You can see what's going on, the services. The WARE lecture is, see, Brittany Packett is going to be speaking. I just heard her on Pod Save America today. So she was, they did if you follow podcasting, Pod Save America is my favorite lefty liberal podcast. It's a lot of fun. But the WARE lecture, we have some special events that we do One of them is the Ware Lecture, various services and stuff like that at General Assembly. So be familiar with the statements of conscience, bylaw amendments, and business items. Actually, we're not doing SOC this year. But we're doing a CSAI this year. If you look at pages 63 through 83, or download the business agenda from the website, they're identical content. That tells you in detail everything that we're going to be doing business-wise during the general sessions. If you're a delegate, be ready to vote on these, and there's some other items that may come up that I'm aware of. That's it. Do I have another slide? See here, is Evan? Okay. Yes. Yesterday, the Board of Trustees announced a webinar very similar to the things that I've just been talking about. They want to spend about 75 minutes and deep dive into some of the specific items that are going to be coming up in the business. And so there's going to be a meeting on June 5, 7, 9, 9th, and 10th. There's a dial-in number. They don't have an 800 number, but they do have a local number for Silicon Valley. And if you go to that above website, you will find out about that. I think if you're registered, you got an email yesterday, so we'll see. Next. Okay, so the delegate game. Do you want to take it? I can talk about this too. So get your delegate credentials. Okay, so you should have received a delegate credential. What does mine look like? I think that the offsite ones look a little bit different. It's got a big, long, complicated number on it. Oh, where is it? I don't know where my delegate credential is. Okay, well, I have a month to find it, but it's got a number on it when you're a registered delegate. As a representative of your congregation, you can sign up. You can get go to the website, and you will get your delegate credential. Business process and agenda. So there is a business process. Okay, so we have. They'll talk about the 4 microphones. There's a pro microphone, a con microphone, a procedure microphone, and an amendment microphone. When you're on site, you can you line up in the various places. When you're off site, and I have participated in debate as an off-site delegate. I believe they have certain phone numbers that you can call up, and then they will say, well, who are you and who do you represent, and what, are you going to speak pro, con, procedure, or amendment? And then they will figure out where you are in the line, and then when it's your turn to speak, they will tell you it's your turn to speak, and you will speak. They have up on the screen where you are calling from, which they know who you are and who you represent. That'll be there. So see here, read the proposed business items, keep up with CSW alerts every day. So every day there's a Commission on Social Witness alert that they print out that tells you what the status of various items are, because there's some things that take multiple days, like CSAIs, there's a first reading, and then there might be some amendments, things like that. Actions of immediate witness. There's a whole thing on getting signatures, and then there's a preliminary vote and then a final vote on the last day, and so all of that text and stuff is going to be available, and it's available on some website. So your UUA bylaws are available for download. Last year, as a remote delegate, I forced a vote. People remember there was a 4/5 vote that showed up in the middle of proceedings, and that was entirely my work. Okay, so as an offsite delegate, I did a thing on the procedure mic, and I said, hey, according to bylaw such and such and such and such, we have to have a 4/5 vote to do this. And at first the moderator said, no, we don't. And then 15 minutes later, we had this vote that just came out of nowhere, and it's like, I know exactly what that was. The reason why I did that was because I supported the motion. I didn't want to stop it, but I didn't want somebody to come by 3 months later and say, hey, we forgot to check this box off. So that was my doing, and I did it off-site. So there we go. So, okay, off-site delegates can participate every place remotely. Next page, please. I'm talking way over my time limit. I know. Oh, questions. Okay. Okay, Darcy says I'm not. So Darcy, tell me something that I want to know.
I guess I'd love to pause for questions. What's coming up for people? That was a lot of material. I'm assuming somebody has a question.
Yeah, about the One General GA app. If you go to your Google Play Store or whatever, you can download it right now. It's UUA space GA.
And I will say, if you don't do all your homework, the most important thing that you really want to get taken care of early is locating your credential. That is difficult to do when your congregation president has already left for vacation or whatever. So I would say if you do no other homework, locate your credential. Yeah.
It is a lot of information, and judging from the chat, some people have done this before, and that information may not be new. And some people may just, if this is brand new, it may feel like, oh my God, but you'll get through it. And I actually think that the way that Darcy's going to talk about organizing offsite participation helps. You have some buddies, because if you were on site, you'd have buddies. So, Darcy, you want to talk about what this picture is about?
I will. So I'll head into my portion of the evening. This is our little family-sized congregation having General Assembly. There's our delegate, Allie, who's also on this call. Hi, Allie. And a delegate from another nearby congregation. And so I'll just talk a little bit about the story of how this evolved in our congregation. So we had not had a delegate attend General Assembly in a number of years, and people said it was partly because it was expensive and partly because we didn't have a lot of folks that could get the time off work. And then I think once it falls out of the culture of the congregation, nobody's really sure why you would do that. So I wanted to encourage us to get involved. It was the year that we were participating sort of as a beta test of the offsite delegate process. And so for opening celebration, I said I was going to host a wine and cheese party. And so much like Eric was talking about, we went to our adult religious education room where we had a large screen TV, and I brought wine and cheese, and we watched the banner parade, which, really is quite moving. Even every year I'm surprised, but I'm still moved by it. And at that event, I asked our delegates to bring their devices. I had attended. There was a little sort of technical orientation where we all practiced pushing our buttons. But the two delegates from my congregation hadn't found time to do that yet. So it was a wonderful opportunity for, they often do that first night, a vote to accept the procedures. There's usually just that one vote the first night. And that was a great opportunity for all of us to figure out what we knew and what we didn't know. We gathered the next morning for bagels and juice and coffee. And there was just a really nice feeling of camaraderie, and we were able to provide each other with technical support. When we would have a break from the event, we did exactly what on-site delegates do, which is, sit across a table, maybe over lunch, with our program booklets and our business agendas and say, I don't know what that was. What was he talking about? Oh, that's on page 67. And we'd pull that up and try to figure out what we thought about that or what workshops we wanted to attend. And what really convinced me that this was, it's his credential. What really convinced me that this was a good idea was, we do have some people that have family overseas, and I kept saying, wouldn't it be great if we got involved with international UU? And like nobody ever heard me. But as we sat and watched the presentation from our international churches and about our international congregations, people turned to me and said, wow, we should do that. And although we have yet to become a partner church, there are a number of things that came out of General Assembly that went into programming or into action or into board meetings that I think if as an individual person I might have forgotten that I even saw it. But when you're sitting next to people watching the same thing, there's a sense of like, oh, this is important. Then that first year, by day 3, the delegates, both of our delegates traveled quite a ways to the church and had a good high-speed connections at home. And so that we all agreed we were going to attend the rest of General Assembly in our pajamas. And we did. What we're going to do this year, by way of just an example, and I'd love to hear later what you all do when you attend Offsite if you've done it before. This year, now that we know that we want to do this, that's a priority, I would say start as early as possible, making sure that your board and other elected leaders know about the virtual program. I was a sabbatical minister in a congregation this year where the board had no idea you could attend as an Offsite delegate. The other thing I bring to our board or lay leaders is I suggest that we as a congregation offer to pay up to 100% of the registration fee for online delegates. It's not that much money, and it really is a commitment and a service to the congregation, and so I like to support that service as much as possible. Usually our delegates don't need for us to reimburse them 100%, but I know that that makes it accessible in the way that really was the purpose of Offsite participation, to make it really accessible to everybody. I also asked the board for a little bit of money for refreshments, and they said yes again this year. And the other thing I've done this year, since we had a little bit of time in advance, is to talk to the other congregations in our cluster, especially the smaller congregations, especially the congregations that haven't sent somebody in a while, or maybe don't have a minister who's excited about GA and can get them excited. And then I learned the hard way to always put the GA early registration deadline on our church calendar, because that they will not bend if you miss that deadline. So just this past week, I coordinated with our congregation's 2 delegates. Allie's on the call with us today, and April. And we talked about which of those events did we really want to be together at the church to watch. And we decided we wanted to be together for the opening celebration and then for the first general session, for the first plenary. And we decided we were going to have, since it doesn't start till 8 o'clock, we were going to have a dessert party starting around 7 to convince people to come celebrate with us. And then we will show almost exactly what you're looking at right now. We'll show the banner parade on our screen in the sanctuary that first night, and then roll out of bed the next morning over bagels and coffee and juice and get right to work. Now, one of the things that's exciting this year is we have another local congregation that hasn't sent a delegate, virtual or otherwise, in forever, but we usually attend a solstice bonfire with them. And the Service of the Living Tradition is going to happen on the solstice this year, and they just got the internet in their building. So as the bonfire comes to a close, we're going to stream the Service of the Living Tradition inside the building. Finally, now that we've decided which events we're going to commit to attending, I put that on the church calendar, in the church newsletter, and I created a Facebook event. And part of what I'm thinking is if people wanted to attend virtual GA from our congregation, that Facebook event could be a place where we comment about what we've seen, what we've experienced, questions we have, things like that. Let's see, what else did I want to let you know? And then once we get through that first day, we tend to go day by day. The same way you do at General Assembly. Once you've been there for a while, you figure out which issues are really important to you, which workshops you must see, and which days you're going to sleep in. As you're moving through General Assembly, whether or not you're able to be with other people in meet space, I think it's a great idea to be in conversation with other people. If you are lucky enough to have another virtual delegate in the room with you, to talk through the ideas that you're hearing, the questions you have, and specifically how you think these things could be communicated to your home congregation when it's over. For those of you who, for whatever reason, are not going to be able to do this with another Unitarian within arm's reach, if you haven't done this before, there's a wonderful chat flow that'll be on your computer or phone screen. And I think virtual delegates are really a lovely community, a very friendly community. They want to help each other. And so if you cannot figure out where the action of immediate witness is, that little chat box is a great place to say, I'm lost. And I found that people I don't even know will jump in to help me. And I found that I'll see some of the same names go by day after day. And so creating an online community as well as an in-person one. And the last thing, this is the first year that we're really trying to, when I created that Facebook event for our virtual General Assembly, I sent that invitation to some of the area cluster congregations where when I go preach, I say, what about General Assembly? Don't you want to go to General Assembly? And really specifically inviting them to come have dessert with us and watch the opening celebration. So I'd be curious to hear, either in the chat or using your microphone. Yeah, Evan, go ahead and put us back. From other folks, how have you made connections when you do participate as an offsite delegate, or what are you thinking about doing this year?
Right. So I'll say that sometimes you do run into, last year there were a few people in the chat who I recognized as being, and somebody from across the country. So there is a little bit of that. One thing we have a Second Life congregation. I don't know if you're familiar with Second Life at all, but it's like a virtual. In fact, tonight is committee night online. So we have, and in fact, one of our committee members is from Australia. So it's in the middle of the morning for him. So that's not a big deal there. One thing that my congregation did last year was that we also streamed the Sunday morning service before our regular service. So it happened to be an hour before. And I believe Cedar Lane does that too, is that they would stream that service and then go into, because it's summertime. And last year, one of our ministers was at GA. So, that's something else to consider if you have a smaller congregation, is that just, piggyback off of what's happening in Kansas City, because it's going to be at 10 o'clock Eastern, I believe, is when it starts. And it generally starts right on time. General Assembly tends to stick to its schedule since we're all uptight white people. But anyway. Oh, one thing I did find, as I remember, is I do have my program book from Portland. So, this is, if you do attend in person, they do have some of these that they hand out, that they actually print and hand out. But the other thing that was in there was like CSW alerts. So, this is what the CSW alert looks like. You get one, they print one up every morning, and it tells you about things like some of the workshops that are going to be going on, some of the mini assemblies that are going to be going on. Afterwards, this is Saturday mornings when they talk about the actions of immediate witness that they were considering. And then when when they were going to be talking about that. Again, an action of immediate witness is something that is happening right now, that as a General Assembly, not as the UUA, but as the participants in the, sitting in Kansas City or across the nation as delegates, this is an activity, an action, an item that we feel that the denomination, or at least the General Assembly, should make a statement on. And a lot of people say, well, what good is that? Because the moderator will remind you that, all of the urgency of this action of immediate witness ends at 5 p.m. on Sunday. So what good is that? But AIWs have been used by UUA staff to go out and justify, for example, when there was a lot of pending legislation on, LGBT rights and stuff like that, that to go out and support this legislative ministry group to go off and lobby on behalf of the UUA. There's all this stuff about, we're not lobbying and all that fun stuff, but things like that. But AIWs were used as justification for doing those sorts of actions. So they are important, because unless there's something that the UUA staff can point to and say, well, this is why we're doing that, their preference is to kind of do nothing, right? People say, well, why doesn't the UUA talk about this? Well, we don't have, we don't have a clerical theological structure, right? They are just administering the health plan. But if we tell them as a group of congregations that, look, this is important to us, UUA staff, you can now go off and do something about that. AIWs are good for that, because the CSAI process, the Congregational Study and Action Issue process, is a multi-year process, and we can't do an AIW on NFL football players kneeling during the national anthem, for example, right? That's something that we didn't even know about 4 years ago. How can we put out an SOC today about it? But we might be able to do that this year, for example. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Eric. Other stories or questions, or how you've done this offsite thing? If a couple of people have made some comments in the chat, if you want to come on and describe how that was, that'd be great, because people can benefit from your story.
Yeah, I see that Peter says that last year Cedarhurst streams the Sunday service as its Sunday service. Did they go well? Did that go smoothly? We've been nervous about doing that. We were worried we would have some sort of technological struggle with that.
I'll tell you that from the technical side, from the senders, right, the people actually sending out, the GA tech deck is slick. They really have their act together. But right, it's always your internet service provider then drops you on Sunday morning because they're doing maintenance. That's the.
Right. Yeah, Peter says it went well, and that they even had newcomers that liked it. It is really a powerful service, so it seems like a great idea. And I've wondered about, like, as I'm going along, one of the things I think I'm going to change this year is you see something amazing and powerful, and you think you're going to remember exactly where that was. There was, for example, there was a moment last year when I think it was during the motion that you were talking about, Eric, where a fellow ended up not getting a chance to make an amendment. And they brought him up on stage and they said, this guy wanted to make an amendment and couldn't make an amendment. And, that's just an example of the Robert's Rules process is part of white supremacy culture. And, it's part of the culture that we're needing to look at and dismantle. And I thought that was a powerful moment. And I brought that back to my UUMA chapter. Could we in the UUMA chapter consider letting go of Robert's Rules? And somebody said, does anybody remember where that was? Well, there was like 16 hours of plenary. So my tip for you, pro tip for you this year is if you see something really cool, write yourself a note which session it was and about how many minutes or hours through the session it was, if you're thinking of going back and lifting it up to bring it to your congregation later. Other thoughts or suggestions?
So Oh,
Allison?
I wanted to say, it's not really a suggestion, but I just wanted to talk about how we came about doing these virtual delegate things at the church. 3 years ago, both myself and the other virtual delegate didn't have high-speed internet at our homes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we decided to meet at church. And it was so wonderful that from that point on, we said the more people we can get involved, the better. And that's how this has evolved. And it's a great, great way to get everybody involved in General Assembly and everyone in the congregation much more aware of what's going on in the UUA as a whole. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and Allie, you make a really good point that there is a justice issue here around internet accessibility. I serve in a very rural community where a lot of, a surprising number of members can't stream from their home. So it's great to do the streaming at the church to make it accessible. The other thing that's nice about doing that streaming at the church is then all the people that might happen to be at the church for whatever reason, they're just there to water the plants or show up for a committee meeting, poke their heads in and get to see a little bit of General Assembly. I would also encourage people to remember that whatever number of people show up, if you decide to gather with other people for a streaming party, whatever number of people show up is the right number of people. Sometimes we are just the 3 or 4 delegates, and that's it. And we're in the sanctuary all by ourselves. We got the whole sanctuary to ourselves. It's been a really, the feeling even of just having 3 people together streaming General Assembly and watching those powerful worship services with those powerful moments, and we look at each other like, wow, part of the whole thing about offsite delegates is that every voice matters. Every voice matters, and we really want both the ongoing participation of the big congregations and finding a way to really make sure all the congregations are fully represented. Any other suggestions or questions about any of this?
Yes, I was a remote delegate last year, and I enjoyed it very much. I watched by myself. We had several on-site delegates, and it was nice to see them on the screen. I'm hoping to get others involved remotely this year, but I haven't succeeded yet, so far as I know. Will this orientation be available to them if they register between now and the assembly?
Yes, I'm recording it. It will be available on the Central East website. And if it's helpful, I think there's probably some follow-up on email that I'm collecting here. And once the link is available, I'll send it. So in probably about a week.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And you might consider, Barbara, finding yourself a GA buddy. Specifically, who in your congregation would you enjoy watching General Assembly with? That might be a good way to go. I've often found sometimes I'm celebrating 20 years of ministry, and I've been amazed. I'll put things in the newsletter, I'll put things on Facebook, and and then I'll just ask somebody, would you do this with me? And they're like, sure, that'd be fun. So a personal invitation sometimes can really help make those connections.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion, even if they're not a delegate.
Absolutely. That raises a really important point, Barbara, is that there are 2 other ways that you can participate offsite. One is called an offsite registration. So somebody who registers from offsite can do everything you can do except vote. They can even ask questions and things like that. And there is a fee to register just as an offsite participant who's not a delegate. And then finally, a huge chunk of General Assembly can just be live streamed. And so if you're watching something really awesome, there is a link for the bigger events, not, as some people are saying on the chat, not some of the workshops, but for the bigger events, there's a link where people can live stream spontaneously from their homes if they've got a minute. And so I've often tried to share those links on Facebook or in a text message to a friend, like, hey, this is happening now, you may be interested in it.
Thank you.
So just a little FYI, if you've downloaded the program book on page 46, they do have the order of service for the Sunday service. And so every time I look at it, I open it for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh. So Sarah Jebian, who is the music director at Rockville, is going to be singing a hymn. And then I see that Natalie Fenimore, who was ordained at Rockville, is going to be giving a reading also. She's up in New York right now. There we go. Go Rockville. Whatever.
Just a note that I'm pulling from some of the conversation in the chat. The CSW alert, by the way, is findable in the app. So that's part of what makes it such a handy thing to have. Is every day you can just pull up that alert as well as the schedule. Well, that I think is about time, unless someone wants to jump in with one last question. So thanks so much for joining us, and I will process this video and send it, get it up on the web and give you all a link. Thanks so much, Eric and Darcy, for sharing your experience with all of us. Very valuable.
Look for us in the chat or in the General Assembly.
Right, hang out in the chat together.
Right. Friend me on the GA app. Go ahead. Ask me anything. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.